For what purpose the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 348 offered by Mr. Peters of California. Page 27, strike line 23, and all that follows through line 17 on page 28.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes on his amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In my first career, I worked as an environmental lawyer for about 15 years and witnessed firsthand businesses and local governments struggle to understand and follow what they felt were overly complex and time-consuming regulatory requirements. And I know that the Harvard Business School in its strategic priorities for federal policy and United States competitiveness identified simplified and streamlined regulations as one of the things we could do to help make sure that the United States is a competitive place to do business worldwide. And so I very much appreciate the spirit of the RAPID Act, and I would actually support the RAPID Act if it weren't for one provision, which is the subject of my amendment. Subsection K includes a prohibition of any consideration of what's called the social cost of carbon. Well, what does that mean? Well, as highlighted in Mayor Bloomberg's bipartisan risky business report, accounting for the social cost of carbon and preparing for climate change is a smart business practice. If we continue on our current path, by 2050, between $66 billion and $106 billion worth of existing coastal property will likely be below sea level nationwide. 87% of all Californians live in coastal counties, and 80% of the state's GDP is derived from those counties. Greenhouse gas-driven changes in temperature by burning fossil fuels will necessitate construction of new power generation capacity that the Bloomberg report estimates will cost residential and commercial ratepayers as much as $12 billion per year. That's $12 billion that could be spent by families to put their kids through school, to buy a home, to repair our roads and bridges, to hire more employees, give annual bonuses. Accounting for these costs now provides greater certainty and greater freedom in the future. But the business community is not the only one that's expressed this concern. I serve also on the Armed Services Committee, and in 2014, the Pentagon issued a report on the security risks associated with profound changes to global climate and the environment. The report found that climate change poses an immediate threat to national security. How's that? Again, consider my home state of California. Right now, we're in year 3 of what has been one of the worst droughts on record. Communities across the state are facing water shortages, and many, including in San Diego, have to be increasingly prepared to abandon their homes during fire season. California, we're well developed. The state and its localities are in the process of mitigating the effects of the drought. But consider if the drought in California occurred in a region with less capacity to plan for and adapt to changes. The results are food shortage, poverty, infectious disease, additional national security risks. And given the high stakes associated with carbon emissions, shouldn't we at least understand the long-term costs associated with any project, particularly these big projects that we're considering? In a bill that aims to provide long-term certainty, why would we turn a blind eye to these considerations? So I'd like to take a cue from the Pentagon and the private sector and from businesses that already account for the costs of carbon, and I'd like to ensure that taxpayers are not shortchanged but are paid fair value. So my amendment would strip out Section K, which prohibits even a discussion of these costs in the course of what would be a shorter timeline, which I support. And I also recall that I asked the witnesses who came here, most of them majority witnesses, each one of them, whether this part of the law, this law that this subsection K that deals with carbon, was important to the streamlining effort. And they said basically no. In fact, they didn't even know that had been added to the law. So we could get away with taking this part out and preserve what my colleague, Mr. Marino, has rightly identified as a problem. We can't have these long, interminable delays in getting projects approved. I agree with that. And actually voted with the folks on the other side to preserve the core of this bill, which would result in the approval of projects when they run out of time. But you have to have, within that short time frame, we have to have the ability to talk about these costs of carbon. It's fundamental, and these things should be worked out within the process. They can be worked out within the process in a short timeline that would achieve the goals of the RAPID Act. If you agree with the amendment and strip this out, you'll have my support for the bill. Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
The chair thanks the gentleman. For